Social media, certainly, and digital media. So we were able to sell through 6,000 pieces in, I think it was a month and a half. And then we kind of knew that we were onto something. And so we went out and raised a bunch of money. We raised a little over $1 million. And we rolled our product out through DrTV. So that commercial that you see there, we hired a company to film the commercial. We manufactured 60,000 pieces of seat pets in China, set up a fulfillment company out on the West Coast, and then we started buying media. And so when you do DrTV, you buy test media first to make sure that people are going to care about it and buy it. And then you slowly ramp up your weekly spends on media until you know that it will support the amount of media you have to be buying to get sell-through at mass market retail. So in DrTV, the end game is mass market retail. So depending on the product, you'll sell anywhere from 8 to 10 times as much as you sell direct to consumer. So direct to consumer meaning when people call the 800 number or go to the website to order, that's your kind of baseline customer, and then you'll have 8 to 10 times that many customers pick it up at mass market retail. So when you do DrTV, you have to do it with an eye toward mass market retail. You have to get distribution at mass market, otherwise it doesn't work, right? So we start selling it online, then we go to DrTV, we start buying more and more DrTV. I think we probably started at $15,000 or $20,000 a week, and eventually got that up to $100,000 or $125,000 a week, and it was holding. So the metrics in DrTV, the cost per order is a key metric, and the media efficiency ratio, the MER, is another key metric. But you can look at those metrics and know whether or not it's going to work at retail, once you start applying a lot of horsepower to it. So it worked, and then we did the next step, which was meeting with mass market retailers. Now we started in the drug channel because those were the easiest meetings for us to get. So the first meeting we had was with Rite Aid. So we drove out to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, met with the Rite Aid buyer, showed them the DrTV commercial, showed them, most importantly, how it was converting, and shared with them our media plan, so what we were going to spend in the way of media in the coming few quarters, and Rite Aid ordered 8,000 pieces of seat pets. And then we went to CVS in Connecticut. CVS ordered, I don't know, 8,000 or 10,000 pieces of seat pets. Then we went to Walgreens, got them to order. Dwayne Reed, got them to order. Then we got a meeting with Bed Bath & Beyond. And Bed Bath & Beyond, I ordered a lot more. I don't know, it was 50 or 60,000 pieces, right? Then we get a meeting with Toys R Us. Well, Toys R Us, of course, is in the sweet spot for seat pets. So that was sort of independent verification that we were onto something at that point. And Toys R Us placed a big order. Target ordered. Macy's ordered. Somebody else. Kohl's ordered. Well, no, that comes next. Kohl's ordered. Then we get the meeting with Walmart, right? Which is, if you're in mass market, Walmart is a holy grail. So, if you're in the consumer goods space, if you looked at every retailer in the country, Walmart represents half of those sales. So Walmart is everybody else put together, and so it's critical to be in Walmart. So we went to Arkansas, met with Walmart. And Walmart gave us a PO for 600,000 seat pets, right?
What were they charging?
Good and bad, $20. So good and bad. So you get an order for 600,000 pieces. Up to that point, we were funding orders with the money that we had raised, right? But the Walmart order alone, our landed cost of goods on seat pets at that point was a little under $5, $4.97 or something like that, right? So 600,000 pieces means that we have to wire the better part of $3 million to a factory in China, right? And hope for the best for 2 months, right? And then they ship the goods, 30 days on the water, hit the warehouse in Long Beach, California, Then we're responsible for the logistics to get the seat pets out to the Walmart distribution centers. They take the seat pets out to the Walmart stores. And then if everything goes perfectly, probably 60, 90 days from then, we start getting checks from Walmart. If it doesn't, there aren't any checks from Walmart, right? So, and you know, then if it's not selling, then Walmart starts marking it down. And if anybody marks it down, the party's over, right? Because you can't, no new retailers are going to place orders if where it is already, it's not selling through, right? So at that point, kind of doing the math and figuring out the risk reward of the whole thing, we decided to find a licensee. So that's like, now let's say that's probably 6.5 years ago. So for the past 6.5 years, we have a licensee for seat pets. They manufacture, market, and distribute seat pets now throughout the world, and it's, you know, they pay us a royalty. So and you know, it's always been in the millions of pieces every year, and they take they assume all of the product liability, which is obviously really important if you're thinking about kids' product. There's a real high degree of liability, and they pay us a royalty every quarter. And so this is really relevant to what we do at Lightning Launch, because seat pets for us, going through that process ourselves, was the genesis for developing a company that was very inventor-centric. And I think a lot of course, every company that markets to inventors wants to convince inventors they're inventor-centric, right? But what we found when we did seat pets was that most people that we were interacting with were trying to sell us something, a service of some sort, really agnostic to the value of the idea. And so they weren't really assessing in any great way whether the product was good or bad, but you know, they were selling us a video of the product, or they were selling us, you know, worldwide IP on the product, or they were selling us prototypes, or they were selling us marketing services, or PR, or remarketing and retargeting on our website, or SEO. But again, we paid whether it worked or not. And we wrote a lot of checks. We were fortunate in a lot of ways because we'd raised a lot of money, so we were able to write a lot of checks. But the downside of having access to a lot of money is that it's pretty easy to write checks, right? So what's really interesting about the consumer goods space, especially in the mass market, is a lot of it isn't intuitive. So before seat pets, I had started 6 businesses, 5 of them were successful. I have a big background in business. I thought, like, I was fully equipped to start a kids' plush toy company. That didn't seem like any great shakes to me. Amber certainly started 3 or 4 businesses up till that point. She's a lot younger than I am. And she was like, you know, a producer for huge TV shows. So this sort of stuff didn't seem like it would be particularly challenging for us. But what we found when we really started to dig in is that there's a whole sort of ecosystem inside of consumer goods where a lot of it isn't intuitive. Like, unless you're doing it, unless you're interacting with, especially mass market retailers, they just do business a whole different way. And many of them have their own unique ways of doing business that aren't obvious from the outside. Typically, the guidance you're getting when you go to mass market retailers is from a sales rep. So we hire a rep group to get a meeting with Rite Aid, right? The sales rep drives with us down to Harrisburg, you know, meets his friend the buyer, tells him how great it is. We leave with a PO, he leaves with a check, because they get paid when they get the PO. Their job is done. Sometimes that order is a good thing for you. Sometimes, you know, we found not a great thing. For instance, with seat pets, the first retailer of consequence that had seat pets was Rite Aid, right? So Rite Aid gets seat pets, we're running the TV commercial. Fast forward probably like 2 months, 2.5 months, we get a meeting with Toys R Us. Now, Toys R Us, that was a critical meeting for CPATs. You want to be at Toys R Us, especially during the holidays, if you're trying to sell kids plush product, right? Well, probably a week before the meeting with Toys R Us, I got a call from the buyer at Rite Aid saying, look, it's not selling through the way we need it to. We're going to mark it down, right? So I couldn't let that happen, because if we allowed Rite Aid to mark down seat pads, and now we're in, now we're meeting with Toys R Us, obviously everything is connected and available instantly online. So the first thing the buyer at Toys R Us is going to do before the seat pads meeting is Google seat pads and see who's selling it and for how much. Well, if she sees it at Rite Aid for $8.88 on clearance, there's no chance she's going to write a PO to me for $11.25, right, and hope for the best. So that the party's over. So what we had to do was we had to take back, I don't know, 7,000 seat pads from Rite Aid, just so that we didn't pollute the market, right? Because Rite Aid for us at that point wasn't strategically smart. Like Rite Aid should have been what we did in the second or third year with the kids' toy product, when it had universal appeal. Like when people knew what it was, hands down, they were clamoring to get it, not in the first 3 months, right? But of course, the sales rep that got us into Rite Aid, it didn't really matter to him whether Rite Aid sold the seat pets or not. As long as Rite Aid wrote us the purchase order, he got a check for 7% or 8% of whatever that order was. So I go into Rite Aid, I get a PO for 8,000 pieces. Let's say they're roughly 11 bucks a piece, 12 bucks a piece. That's a $100,000 order from Rite Aid. The sales rep gets his 7,000 or 7,500 or whatever it was, and he goes off to find the next seat pads. Because what you find is most of these sales reps have these sort of commodity products that they sell, that they've been selling for 20 years to all of the retailers they work with, and then they find the one-hit wonders that come along, where people like us that are saying like, hey, can you get me to Rite Aid? Of course I can. Buyer takes a chance, and again, there's the only person typically in those relationships taking the risk are you, or the product owner, because you're making the inventory, paying for the logistics, getting it to the retailer, and hoping for the best. You never get paid unless it sells through. So the focus, if you're doing sort of distribution, if you're going to make the product and sell it, has to be on getting sell-through at the retail level. It can't just be on getting the retail order. It has to be on getting people to buy. So if you're doing what we call brand building, or making your own product and distributing, paying for the manufacturing, getting that sorted out, storing it, getting orders, fulfilling the orders, you've got to be acutely focused on getting sell-through at the retail level. And you got to do it in such a way that's logical, so you're working with retailers that are best situated to sell your product, that are right in the sweet spot for your product, that are going to merchandise it correctly, and that are going to give you the placement you need in the store. I mean, you don't want a new product that no one's ever seen before, most people won't be looking for, to be like on a bottom shelf in the back of the store. You want to get it in high traffic areas. So when we did CPATs, we found all these things that weren't obvious, but that ultimately were critical. And we overcame a lot of learning curve with the checkbook, right? And so the lesson learned there is find people who've sort of been there and done that, and whose motivation is nobody's ever going to be equally motivated as you if you're the person that conceived the product. Obviously, it's your baby, it's their project, but as equally situated as possible to you, so that they're going to be a strategic partner as well as sort of a service partner, right? Because really, I don't know, 80 or 90% of the checks that we wrote for CPATs were to people who went out and did whatever we paid them to do. And they were good people, and they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I mean, they told us what they were going to do, told us how much it costs, we wrote the check, they did exactly what they said they were going to do. So there's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of great things. The challenge as an inventor is figuring out what you need, how much of it you need, when you need it, and how to sort of orchestrate all of that with whatever budget you have, right? Because if you, I don't care if your budget is $10,000 or $10 million. If you don't, if a significant part of that budget isn't set aside for actually getting people to buy the product when it's available on the shelves or whatever, nobody's going to buy it. Because even though we live in an age where you can find anything online, I mean, that's kind of a good and a bad thing. It also means you have to spend a lot of money or a lot of time, or usually a little bit of both, to be a standout so people take notice and then, buy it, hopefully like it, and tell their friends about it, right? So they all buy it. But so Lightning Launch, the idea was we would situate ourselves as much as humanly possible when we designed our revenue model to be in the revenue stream with the inventor. So we charge for everything that we do. I mean, we're a business, we're not a charity, right? But the lion's share of our revenue comes from revenue sharing in sales. So if you do licensing with us, the lion's share of our revenue, of your fee to us, comes from us making a licensing deal with somebody, them paying you a royalty, and you paying us a percentage of that royalty. If you do brand building with us, where you're going to make the product and then go, with our help, distribute it at retailers online or some combination thereof, we get paid. Again, the lion's share of our fee comes from when you get paid from the retailer, not when the order is placed, but when they actually pay you, which is kind of critical. You pay us, depending on the product or positioning, some percentage of retail sales. So that's kind of how we get paid. And so we've had Lightning Launch now for, I think we're on our 5.5 years. We started out primarily doing licensing work, and that sort of evolved over time to now we probably have an equal amount of licensing clients and brand building clients. So we have people that hire us and say, go find us a licensing deal. I want to find somebody to license the IP, manufacture the product, pay us a royalty, set it and forget it. We do a ton of that work. That for us is now in over a long period of time we've built up a huge network of potential licensees. So Amber and I are out meeting, typically face-to-face with licensees, showing them product that's right in their sweet spot, seeing what they like, what they don't like, and putting deals together. It's a lot of blocking and tackling. It's not like listed on a website and hope for the best. It's trading on a relationship, knowing what people are doing, what's working, what isn't working, what worked in the past, what's coming, shortly with their sort of product lineup, and figuring out what the sweet spots are. So that's licensing, and then we do brand building, which is we now have a team in Newburyport of 15 people who are all specialists. So Amber and I at this point are kind of the generalists that are strategic in everything, and then we have specialists who do all sorts of things. So people that are experts in social media, or people who are experts in PR, or people who are experts in manufacturing or distribution or retargeting and remarketing, SEO, kind of pick a thing. All of that stuff evolves so quickly that if you're not in it every day, you can't keep up. So like, and social media is a good example. What was working 2 months ago isn't working right now. So what's working now is what's working now. By the time you read a book about social media marketing, you're probably 3 generations behind the curve if the book was printed in the last quarter of last year. So so the cool thing about brand building at Lightning Launch is it's a bunch of people all under one roof, all sort of specialized, and we're accountable for what they do. So rather than having to go out, when we did CPETs, we had to hire a PR person. We hired a digital marketing company. We hired a social media company. And so you had all these sort of moving pieces that we were coordinating. And if something wasn't working, it was very easy for one to point the finger at the other to say, well, you know, the social media is great, your website sucks. Or the social media's, or the website's great, your shopping, it's the wrong shopping cart. Or, you know, you're just not taking advantage of the retargeting. Or the leads aren't good. Or, you know, pick a thing. So we try to do a lightning launch, and it's not a perfect science, but I think it's good and getting better. What we try to do a lightning launch is put it all under one roof. We don't outsource anything. So everybody that does work for us comes to Newburyport every day, has an office, and we interact. So it's really synergistic. And that's what we do, and it works. Again, it's inventing. So it's always a percentage. It never works 100% of the time. What you're trying to do as an inventor is you know, game the odds. You're trying to get the highest probability of success you can get. And typically the way people market to inventors is by talking about possibility, right? So you see the guy, the 1 in a million guy that made, you know, $3 million when somebody bought his patent or whatever. Well, right, but that's 1 in many millions, right? When you look at the number of patents, it's a mind-numbing number, and then you look at the number of people actually out buying patents, it's a much smaller number. And that's not to say that you shouldn't get a patent, but it is to say that there's no business in getting 1,000 patents and just hoping for the best. It's like going out and buying 1,000 URLs and hoping somebody's going to contact you and, you know, you're going to be a millionaire overnight. It's just a lot of hard work. The exciting thing about inventing is when it works, it's like there's nothing better. When you see something that you conceived or you had part in developing on a retail shelf, especially like at a store like Walmart or something, you get your friends like, hey, we saw that at Walmart. What? Yeah, so, but what I'm here to tell you is there's a lot of middle ground between your idea and Walmart. And that execution, all that execution in the middle is critical. So the idea, obviously, you have to have a great idea. I mean, that's sort of the given. If you don't have a great idea, you execute till the cows come home. It's not gonna succeed. But the great idea is the starting point. Everything that comes after is what determines whether you're going to succeed or not. I meet a lot. I go to, you know, I don't know, 25 trade shows a year, so I meet gazillions of inventors. I meet some people with brilliant ideas that just can't execute, right? And they can't step back enough to let somebody else execute, right? Because they're just kind of holding it in. So I'm going to go to the hardware show in the end of May. The past 4 hardware shows I've been at, I've seen the same guy with the same product in the same booth, and every year he tells me the same thing, which is, yeah, brand new product, I'm just launching it. Oh, do you have inventory? No, but we're going to manufacture it. So he's interacting with buyers as if they could place an order, but he doesn't have any inventory. And he's spending a ton of money. I mean, if you go to the National Hardware Show, booth is probably $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. You're staying in Vegas for 3 or 4 days. You got to fly there. You got to get all your stuff there. Take all your stuff back. You know, I don't know. Maybe 30% of the people that I interact with at a show aren't ready to sell anything. They don't have any inventory. You go to a show, you're interacting with buyers. Everybody else is trying to sell you something. Like, you know what I'm saying? If you buy a booth at a show and you don't have products to sell, like inventory, everybody that comes by is either going to be there to buy something, you have nothing to sell them, or to sell you something. So you're paying, like I remember we went to Toy Fair, like year 1 of CPATs. We went to Toy Fair at Javits. The booth is 10 grand. We had 10 people staying in New York for 5 or 6 days. There's no way we didn't spend 10,000, maybe closer to 15. And I left with like 10 business cards of people who were like buyers, none of which I ever heard from again, and probably 200 people who were trying to sell us something. I heard from all of them many, many, many times, right? So it's a matter of really like understanding the landscape, taking a breath. I think one of the big things as an inventor is you get very excited about it. Everybody everybody that's trying to sell you something knows you're excited about it, right? It's your baby. And so that kind of puts you at a little bit of a disadvantage. And so you got to remember that and really think about, like, logistically, am I interacting with somebody that's going to kind of be able to walk me through this, or is it sort of are they providing a piece to the puzzle, right? Because it's a complicated puzzle, and there's a lot of blue sky in the puzzle. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Did you do a focus group with seat pets? Because I've heard focus groups are done a lot by toy companies. What you could tell me about?
Yeah, we actually hired a company for a little bit to do a focus group and opted out because then, so the way it worked is it was quick because we had like a lot of success online out of the gate, and so we sold 6,000 pieces in a month and a half. Like that was, I don't know, it's like the average order was $30, so it's 180 grand in a month and a half. So then we went to our group of investors. Up to that point, it was just our own money. Then we went to our group of investors who were like, this is gold. So we had it wasn't a big thing. Like, it wasn't like 3 failed Kickstarters and then we're like scrambling. Like, we had the dough in the bank in 2 months, like tops 2 months, right? And then we like suddenly, okay, you've got like $1 million and change now. What are we going to spend it on? And so people were like rapid fire saying, you need this, you need that, and it all makes sense. Like, everybody that's trying to sell you something, like, you think like, yeah, I need that, yeah, I need this, yeah, I need that. And so we hired somebody to do a focus group, but then we were already filming a TV commercial. And the people that filmed the TV commercial were really good people. And I became really friendly with one of the partners in that company who told me, like, yeah, your focus group was the 6,000 people that bought it. So I think,
okay.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is like, a lot of people that are good at inventing, right, have very sort of analytical minds or like an engineering mindset, right? And so it becomes very attractive to make this all a math problem, right? So you get like the feedback, then you want to focus group it, then you take it to the focus groups, and it's a lot of dough. I mean, I don't know, it's 10 grand to do like a focus group of consequence, and then they give you the data, and maybe it's like, it's always like sort of on the bubble, I'm not quite sure. Maybe you can change this or change that, then you're into another focus. It's like prototyping, right? You have like 10 prototypes, because you make it, then you try it. That's why I always say, like, in retrospect, like, our IP probably changed 3 or 4 times because we did the IP before we did the prototype. So like everything we thought was valuable wasn't, like when you actually made one and tried to make it work. So like with seat pets, which seems like stupid simple, right? But what happens is when you put the seat pet on a seat belt, the head of the seat pet, because it's wide and the kid's head is interacting with the head, if you don't attach it in the right way. So one of the unique pieces of IP in seat pets is the flap on the back of the head of the seat pet, and the width of that flap, and the length of the flap. So what happened was, in the beginning, we had a really narrow flap, like the width of the seat belt.
What flap?
On the back of the seat pet, the flap that attaches it to the seat belt. Yeah. So what would happen is when we tried it, it was great when the kid's like sitting upright in the car. As soon as the kid falls asleep, the seat pet head is going with their head to the side window of the car. It was taking the seat belt outside of their, instead of where it's supposed to be, like just off of their clavicle, it was taking it out to like their humerus, right? Well, that's a disaster if there's a car accident. You need the seat, you can't be displacing the seat belt. So we couldn't figure that out until we had one. And then we made it and tried, and then like the way all the pockets aligned and yeah.
How do you differentiate yourself or your firm from a distributor?
Yeah, so I think I think we're going to be much more focused on getting sell-through in the marketing side. So distribution is kind of necessary, but not our focus. So our focus is always going to be on sell-through, because if you get distribution without sell-through, the distribution dries up like almost immediately. Versus if you have sell-through, like if you started with an Amazon business and you got good sell-through at Amazon and good feedback on Amazon, and then you went to your first distributor, it would be easy to get an order from them, right? And then you got to make sure that it sells through at the first retailer or distributor. Like they're buying it, they're selling what they're buying, they're paying you and ordering more, right? And then, so it's really important that that first distributor or retailer, whether they're big or small, is a good fit, right? So rather than getting, like with seat pets, we took whatever we could get out of the gate because we were just happy to be like, it's thrilling to be Rite Aid. Like if you go walk into a Rite Aid and, hey, there's my thing, great. You know, but again, it's nice, but if they're not going to sell it and pay you for it, it's counterproductive. So focusing on we're going to be much more focused on getting the sell-through. So making all of the claims, getting that aligned in such a way that people want to buy it. And that is so many things to that. Like if you're spending a lot of money on TV and you're making a 2-minute video, it's easy to convey that. If you're not spending, a couple $1 million on TV, then you've got to maybe do that on a package, right? And it depends on your product. If the package is really small, you don't have a lot of real estate to convey that message, because it's not like somebody goes to Walmart to buy a bed sheet and they go to the bed sheet aisle, and you've got like a nice pattern or maybe a licensed, Laura Ashley or something. Like, oh, here's the thing. If you put your product in an aisle in Walmart, who's going to be looking for it and how are they going to find it? Because the attention, when we did see pets, it was 4 times better than it is today. I mean, the attention span of the average person is
8 seconds.
Obscenely minuscule, right? So what used to be a 2-minute TV commercial, now there's more 30-second commercials and 2-minute commercials. What used to be like, try to figure out how to sell it on YouTube in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, is now try to figure out how to sell it on Vine in 7 seconds, but better yet, try to figure out how to sell it on Instagram when somebody's like, just flipping through stuff. Like it's Tinder. I mean, that's what you're up against. ... Yes, yes, no, yes. I mean, so much worse if you're walking down the aisle at Walmart with a bunch of kids in tow and your product's like, down here with a box. Like nobody's ever heard of it before, right? It's not a commodity item maybe. So sorting all that out before you make 100,000 pieces of it and get somebody to buy it because they think it's a good idea or whatever, you got to get the sell-through. So getting the orders isn't nearly as challenging. Getting the POs from retailers or distributors isn't nearly as challenging as is getting the sell-through, because they know if it doesn't sell, they're not going to buy it. Yeah.
It sounds like the amount to make the first product was not enormous. Like our plastics, it requires making a tool, is what I think. So there's a hurdle that's larger, and I think that testing the market the way you could, the 6,000 is a strong position to be in. But if you have to first spend 25,000 at least to do the tool and the design.
Yeah, so we can talk afterwards, but the tool thing, right? I'll give just a quick overview, and it really, the tool thing depends on the size of and complexity of the product, right?
Yeah.
But so you could test the market a little if it's not that complex with 3D printed stuff.
Right, no, we've tested it and it looks good.
Right.
But now what? Like we can't continue to make these small.
Yeah, so I would say that, it's a little counterintuitive, because what most people will do, when you're dealing with plastic especially, right, anything that requires a tool, What most people will do will think like, look, let me just find like a plastic manufacturer here, whatever, get it done here, and then if it works, we'll, ultimately we'll end up in China. Everything ultimately ends up in China, right? What you'll find, the cost of tools in China is probably, like, for instance, one of our products currently is a hairbrush that's special, right? So to tool that in the U.S. is a little, and it's fairly simple, but, unique, but two-piece mold, this, that, not anything too complex,
Right.
this big. To tool that here is a little north of 50,000. To tool it in China is 7,500 bucks. And then the first round of manufacturing, like for instance, if you make that here, 50,000 plus for the tool, and then your cost per unit is, let's say it's a little north of 10 bucks or whatever, versus if you make it in China, it might be 8,000, 10,000 for the tool, and $4 to make. So thinking about, now, that said, it's a little more complicated to deal with somebody in China than it is, somebody in South Dakota. But so there's ways to do it. But look, everything is that. Though. Everything is like that. It's easy when it's small, right, or really small, and then there's this huge gap of like a lot of risk. Not sure what's going to happen. Like now it's like time to write bigger checks, and then it works or it doesn't. But yeah, so I think, depending on the product, to me it would be 3D printed, get people that you don't know to actually write a check for it, tell you it works. And then I would, something like that, assuming it's not really complex, I would probably try it in China first. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Talking about your first product only, if you balance the expense, the aggravation, the work, the everything versus the profit, is it worth going big?
Well,
Or do you get demolished in the process and not actually make money?
well, if you're after the Holy Grail, it's worth going big. Like, it depends what's motivating you. For us with that product, we had like a lot of early success, so we were very excited about it, right? We were thinking like every kid in the country is going to have one of these. Then we had investors that gave us more than $1 million who weren't looking to get $1 million back. They were hoping to get 10 or 15 million back, right? So if I came back to them and said like, hey, this is working out great, it looks like we're going to make 200 grand next year, that wouldn't have gotten anybody too excited. So I think it's kind of the setup for that. For me, it was worth the work, but that became our full-time job. It wasn't like we didn't have day jobs at that point. That's like we were all in. So yeah.
Does Lightning Launch primarily deal in consumer products?
Yeah, primarily. We do some. I'm sure there's a more elegant way to describe this, but niche licensing stuff on the licensing side, and then we have a couple of clients. So, for example, some very technical product or technology that we would license into a very specific.
What about business to
niche.
business, like something you sell to a business, like that would be like an MIT or a
yeah, so
or
we do.
nothing would be
We're
sold
sort of
to
limited.
consumer.
Yeah, we do, but we're sort of limited. We have right now we have 2 large clients whose businesses we're kind of curating, I guess, for lack of a better words, who are really outside of the consumer goods space. But we don't have a lot of bandwidth for that, so it's very sort of, because that work winds up being something that my partner and I have to do ourselves. So the consumer goods stuff, Amber and I are out doing the licensing stuff, but now we have a staff that we can add to and build on that so we can scale those things. But yeah, we could talk about something specific if you want. If you want.
I can tell you everything about it because it's already been made public.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
It's pretty easy. It's all over the place. So. But it's
Okay.
not something you or anybody in this room would primarily buy, but construction companies, anybody who's
Okay.
doing work would buy.
Yeah. Why don't I grab your ear after?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a technical question. When Rite Aid calls you up on the seat pets and said, hey, these aren't moving, we're going to drop the price to
Yeah.
$8. They are dropping the price they're paying you too.
Yeah, to like, but to nothing.
So in other words,
Yeah.
so in other words, a purchase order is really, they're not buying the stuff, it's contingent on it being
Yeah,
able to sell
there's
through.
guarantees, and so in most of these agreements, in most of these, the fine print, there's a guaranteed sales price. If there isn't, if you ever hope to do business again with any of these retailers, you're gonna take the stuff back. So they're not, or you're gonna never get a check from them.
Yeah.
So whether, good luck.
Whether it's- right.
Good luck trying to collect. But yeah, so the interesting thing about that is the logistics of getting the seat pets back from Rite Aid, for instance, cost me more than making the seat pets in China and getting them to Rite Aid. Because it's like, you think about how it goes.
Plus the box.
You've got a kid, you've got like the kid, the high school kid who's like stocking shelves at Rite Aid, who like mills around the back, finds some diaper box or something, throws all the seat pets in the box, puts a piece of tape on it, throws it in the back of the empty Rite Aid truck going back to their DC. Now I've got to send trucks out to all the Rite Aid DCs, getting those boxes back to Long Beach, California, where our warehouse is, which is a union shop at, I don't know, $80 an hour. I get to pay like 3 guys to dig through those boxes and figure out what you can resell.
Yeah.
And the answer is not much.
Yeah.
And everything you can't resell, you've got to pay them to put on a pallet and get rid of. Everything you can resell, you have to pay them to
Yeah.
spruce
Yeah.
up. And
awful.
it's a nightmare. But if you can't take it back, like I said, then it's all done. And nobody, like in that company, the difference between success and failure in seat pets is our ability to manage that, what happens at Rite Aid, because every meeting after that could not have happened if Rite Aid was marking it down. Like there's no Walmart if it's $8.88 at Rite Aid.
Right.
Like there's no conversation. Nobody's taking a chance if it fails somewhere else. And I think that's a good thing to think about as an inventor. You got to be very careful. There's a lot of so look, there's good people and bad people in any business, and your mileage may vary. But what I found when we were doing CPETs was that there were a lot of companies that their model was really sort of this online showcase, whatever you want to call it, where you would pay them not much money, put up your product, hope people see it, hope people buy it, maybe they crowdfund it or all this other stuff, right? So there's a lot of ways to fail, right? And if you have somebody, if your product is just one of 10,000 listed somewhere, the chance of success, isn't that great. That's not a fair assessment of whether your product is good or not. Just like if you can hire great companies to do, we don't sell TV commercials, so I'm saying there's great people who do TV, there's horrific people that do TV. If you hire, and they charge about the same, sometimes the people that suck charge more than the people that don't, right? Because they don't have many clients. But so, the interesting thing is, if you hire the wrong person to do a TV commercial and it doesn't work, there's no going back. It just didn't work, right? You can't then convince the next retailer, well, but with the right commercial, or I don't like the way this looked or that looked. Like there aren't any at that mass market level. There aren't any second chances. So what I'm telling you is kind of what the landscape is, not to scare you, because I think fear, in general, is probably one of the biggest challenges for inventors, right? Because I know when we started CPETs, we were deathly afraid that somebody would walk by at our booth at Javits, take a picture of the CPETs, and start making them, right?
Right.
But isn't that legitimate fear?
It's a legitimate fear. I mean, it probably does happen, right? But I think if that's 2% of the time, 98% of the time, people are so protective of what they have that it becomes like cumbersome to sell it, right? So if you're a buyer and you're walking around the show, and a lot of what you're doing is not just looking at the product, but figuring out how it's all going to sort out. Like, what's the inventor, the product owner, going to be like? Because they have to order from you, they have to hope you'll fulfill the order. So, great product, inventory, and being a decent person. And I think that we were so conditioned to think that everybody was going to steal something from us that we were fearful of everybody. you know, that we were interacting with in those early days. And I see the people that I meet at shows, that I meet one year and they're in a little booth and they're struggling, and the next year they're in a huge booth and they're obviously not struggling. Like the people that hack the growth curve most effectively, I think are the most ambitious, aggressive, daring people versus trying to preserve everything, you know, because all of this stuff is a shelf life, right? So like what was a good idea 10 years ago is probably not a good idea anymore. Like, and very few things are original ideas, right? So we have an online submission portal, and people submit, you know, I don't know, 100 ideas a week to us, and then we have somebody that goes through them all and figures out what's wheat, what's chaff, and then we interact with those people and product meetings and all that other stuff, right? But it's alarming the amount of stuff that people go out and, you know, pay somebody to apply for a patent on that you could buy on Amazon.
Is there implied NDA on that portal?
Yeah, there's some language, and some people ask us to sign an NDA, and you know we're happy to.
I mean, it's valid what she says. I was on your website today, and it was asking me for my idea.
Mm-hmm.
I closed it.
Yeah.
It's a fear, you know. It's like every website you go to, they're telling you protect your idea,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's this random website asking for my every detail of it. How do you get over that hump? Besides just someone just telling you, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think like, I mean, obviously if somebody wants us to sign an NDA, we will. I mean, I think there's language on our website. So the challenge for us is, typically the way it goes, you have an idea, you interface at some point with somebody who's going to start your patent work, right? And they're telling you, look, don't do this, don't do that, and that's good advice, right? But the challenge for us is, just because you file for a provisional patent doesn't mean that your idea doesn't exist, doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't have a patent on it. I mean, that's just sort of the beginning of the process, right? So for us, we have people submitting stuff from all over the place. So if you look at the disclosures on our website, what it talks about is that we're certainly not going to take your idea, run with it, or do anything else with it without you. But just because you submit something to us doesn't mean you're the first person to submit it. We could be already interacting with somebody who has a patent on it. Like I said, like a lot of times it's not unusual, it's actually more common than uncommon for us to get somebody submits an idea, submits a prototype, submits a patent, you know, the utility patent application, and then part of our due diligence is we do sort of a general web search as well as a USPTO search, and it's not uncommon for us to find the product or the idea available for sale on Amazon. Like, that's not uncommon, because you know, if you go to a, you know, there's patent attorneys that are going to do a full rundown of, you know, every patent ever existed and everything available online, and that isn't free. They have to spend their time and energy to do that. So if you want to pay somebody to do that or do it yourself, then you know, the way that you frame your utility patent application is going to be more advantageous than it might be if you don't do all those things. But you don't have to do it that way. You can just file a utility patent application, do it online, send it to the USPTO, and you know, a year and a half, 2 years later, you'll get an office action that says, you know, no matter how good of a job you or your attorney did, the office action comes and it says, you know, we're not going to give you this patent. And then you answer the office action and say, well, you should because of X, Y, and Z. And then they get that response, and then they actually start looking at it. So there's sort of this whole process around it that isn't obvious until you get it. I know, like when we did CPATs, we spent way more than we needed to on the patent side. We hired like some prominent Boston IP firm. Like if I was, you know, going to be like defending a drug, you know, chemistry claim as J&J, they might be a good partner for that. Way overkill for us. But they didn't, you know, none of that stuff was obvious. But it is now. Like I look at stuff, like I said, everything that comes in, not everything, but 90% of what comes in, people have applied for a utility patent or design patent on. And a lot of it isn't unique, right?
How much of your distribution success was dependent on the patent? If you bypassed the patent, but you continued to go ahead with your production, and would it have?
Yeah, so I mean, we licensed the provision. Like, so in other words, we never had a granted patent.
Okay.
Like, we were still, you know,
So
too far on the north side of that. Yeah, curved. So we licensed the patent pending.
Ah.
Right, yeah. And I would absolutely suggest that you do that, because, so to me, if I had to say, like, okay, how do you do this most efficiently without spending a ton of money? To me, I would make my own prototype, right? In your, like, whatever that means, as rough as it might be, and sort it out. Like, see if you can get it to do what you want it to do, figure out what it, like, in 3D, what works or doesn't work. I would do that before I did anything, right? And then once I had that all sorted out, I would figure the money out, like, because it isn't going to be free, no matter what you do. So I would, you know, put that on the shelf, and I would do whatever I had to do to get sort of that first layer of money together so I could do the next steps, right? And then I would probably very quickly in series do the utility patent application or design patent application and start making and selling, like, in series. Because I run into people that have, like, they have their patents expired, like, because now it's like they didn't really ever do anything with it. Now they're getting, like, the first office action, time to write another check. Half of them have, like, you know, some overseas patent work going on too, before they've ever actually sorted it out. Like, it doesn't even, like, where they're at doesn't even resemble the original idea.
Yeah,
So I think, like, doing that concisely is smart.
It's helpful. It's so hard to sell that it's hard to believe other people could have more success if you put all your time and effort into it. That why would someone else really be able to do it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yep.
I guess you turned, like you said, you alluded that you turned down a lot of what gets submitted to you. And like, I guess you can't share exactly your secret formula, but could you give us a feel about how you say, hey, this has a chance and this doesn't, you know?
Yeah, so it's...
You know, what's your mindset?
It's absolutely, it's a great question. So it's not, anybody that tells you they're like the product picker is trying to sell you something, and not in a good way, right? Because the reality of it is you can know what doesn't work. And if you have, the more experience you have doing what we do, the more obvious it becomes what won't work, right? And so our selection process is a screening process, screen out and what's left. Like, if we can't, we have, I don't know, depending on the week and who's there, but we have between, like, let's say 10 and 15 people in a meeting. If nobody in the meeting can say why it won't work, it's in. But that's few and far between. I mean, because it isn't, you know, so I'll give you some ideas. Like, if it exists already and isn't like a much better solution, right? Because nothing's that novel. But if it isn't a much better solution than what's out there already, right? Goes away. If the cost to manufacture it and scale exceeds the value proposition. So, you know, if we walked around out there today, it would be no great shakes to give away, you know, to exchange $20 bills for $10 bills, right? So if somebody said, like, yeah, I'll give you $10 for that, I love it, but it costs me $25 to make it, that's not a product, right? So, like, that sort of screen out, where somebody sends something in, it's like, yeah, I'm trying to think of an example, like, you know, a way to, you know, pick something up from the ground, but it's like this weird mechanical thing that's got to cost $50 even in scale, right? Okay, you know. Or people will just, like, get one of those things for $2 at the, you know, 99-cent store and use that to pick it up. So if it isn't, you know, those are kind of the screen outs that we do. And mass market, we're looking for stuff that translates into mass market. So if it's really niche-y, not our thing. Yep.
So you said, you know, your steps would be make a prototype, figure out the money, and then quickly submit your design patent application. Did you mean to say design patent?
Well,
Not
design or provisional, I think,
Okay.
and there's, you know, you would have to,
Because I'm sort of at the place right now where
Yeah.
I'm saying, okay, I want to reveal it to my manufacturer, but the
Mhm.
product is extremely easy to knock it
Mhm.
off, so I really want to make sure that the guy really doesn't want to try to
Right,
knock
right.
knock it off.
Right.
So my plan so far is to submit, to file for a design patent,
Mhm.
and I've already done the first draft of the provisional,
Mhm.
but I don't want to necessarily just trust one or the other, so, but is that being too paranoid, you think, or?
well, so let me tell you what, and this is, I'm not a patent attorney, and there's patent attorneys here, so it'd be silly for you not to ask them what they think of what I just said at the end of the meeting, right? But what I found in like, the advantage of a design patent, you can use a design patent almost like a copyright, in that if I'm selling something on Amazon, right, and I have a design patent on that item, and somebody else knocks it off and tries to sell it on Amazon, I can send Amazon a copy of my design patent. They'll look at it and say yes, and they'll take it off. If I send them my utility patent, they'll say, look, we're not in that. You know, because if you read a utility, if you look at a utility patent and look at a design patent, it becomes obvious why that is. So, and I think design patents to some extent too, you'll find that they're a lot easier to enforce at the borders. So if you wanted to stop, if you wanted to cut somebody off at the pass that was importing goods from China, I think customs would get involved if you had a design patent. To my knowledge, this, again, your mileage could vary, but to my knowledge, that's not going to happen if you have a utility patent. To me, if you have an issue with somebody violating your utility patent, you're both going to be writing a long series of large checks, and somebody else will sort that out. Right, you're not going to stop anybody quickly from doing it. So I think that's right.
I've got plans,
Yeah.
both design and utility. Design protects the way it looks, and on a utility patent on this particular invention, protected the way it was made, the way it works, and the method of doing what it's supposed to do. So it was kind of the bullfrogs behind, quite frankly. And they were selling zillions of these things
Yeah.
to Yankee Candle, people like that. But sometimes, it depends on the invention.
Yeah.
Sometimes the design patent would be the only thing you could get, and other times you can get both, sometimes you can't get any. So you should really do a patent search to eliminate anything like
For sure.
talking about that
Definitely.
Mike over done. He gets these kind of disclosure in
Yeah.
simple search,
Yeah.
either on Amazon or
Yeah.
Google or whatever, and then also at the patent office, as you mentioned. And, to do that. We can talk later.
Yeah, I've been very thorough in searches.
Okay,
I'd
great.
rather find it early.
That's good. Then you've done the first step.
And the other, I guess while we're on that, it's good to mention, the other thing that I found, again, it depends on what you're selling, but the reality of most consumer goods is that the US market is a full half of the worldwide market. So you want to be very careful, especially in the early going, in getting too mired in like foreign patents, right? Because we run into people that have, gone through the ringer on the U.S. side, and then they're like they've got like 6 different foreign stuff going. Because the other challenge with patents is if you're not, there's a time frame. So if you're not at retail, you can extend and extend and extend and keep writing checks, but sooner or later you have to pull the trigger. And so I think if you sort of abbreviate if you hold off on the IP until you've got sorted out the idea at least, right? And what works and what doesn't, you can save a lot of iterations on the idea. Just like the prototype. Like maybe at some point you want to have something that's like really killer in the way of a prototype. But so you can pay a prototyper to make that, right? But it's a lot of dough. And what you'll find is that they're just kind of patching it together in your garage or workshop, kitchen, you can a lot of times get pretty close and sort out all of the nuances of it before you pay anybody else. And I think that's key. I mean, because like with sequence, we made some of them and then we're kind of under the gun and got like a prototyper to make them, but it started like even the stupid stuff thing that you wouldn't think, especially you could spend $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a throw, and then you're like, you get it, you're like, well, I wish I had this or that, and you're like, okay, I'll make another one, right? Because that's like how somebody makes a living, is making those things. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, I had a question about, I looked at your website and it does look very inventor friendly and you have experience. I also had the same question about submitting the idea. And I was reading the licensing agreement. So if somebody submits the idea, the inventor still owns the IP.
Oh, yeah. So what you got, that's really a good point, because you got to read the fine print.
I did. Yeah.
But I mean, on every website you go to.
Oh,
Because
exactly, yeah.
Because a lot of these things, and I don't know how like enforceable it ultimately would be, but a lot of these things, it's like check this box, check that box, check this box. And what you might find is that you've just agreed to like give somebody some crazy, royalty on your idea for the next 10 years because you sent it to them.
Right.
So you got to be really careful what you do before you do it.
But yours isn't like that.
No.
And then a quick question, like you said, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to do what you're doing, and there's some good and bad, friendly and not so friendly. There was a situation where a client was talking to somebody, and he said they could do, it's a low-tech invention, and they could do a small amount for, let's say, a few $1,000s, and then when they were ready to sign a deal, he wanted $100,000. I mean, do you also help with people with developing small amounts of prototype, or not so much?
Yeah, so we're not, so I should be like really specific about this. So we don't do prototypes. So we used to, in the very beginning, we had like an outside prototyper that we would refer people to for nothing. I mean, just because it was nice to have somebody. And we got out of that because I would encourage people, like I said, to make their own prototypes, because we found like people would spend.
Yeah, but she needed to do something and she's manufacturing in China right now.
Yeah.
But that's nothing you do, but you can recommend other people?
As far as prototypers go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can. I mean, I would, so typically, if you have a manufacturing relationship, even if it's a new manufacturing relationship, like, I've been very effective at being able to get the manufacturer to do some prototyping. Like what you can do in China quickly compared to what you can do here very expensively and over a long period of time, even given all the barriers you would think exist, is sort of mind-boggling. And I'm, very proud of this country, and I would love to be able to say we should be able to make things here, but if you're in the consumer goods space, like, you can't deny the reality of those economies of scale.
The cost.
Yeah.
So I was saying, should an idea be, or an invention be, if we were to use your services or your...
How much, I'm sorry, what's the first one?
So if we were to go to use your services, at what point of your invention should we be? Like, what stage?
So if you shared your idea with us early on, the value of doing that would be, we could tell you whether it met all the criteria. That wouldn't mean that it would succeed, but we could tell you to stop, and here's why, and that wouldn't cost you anything. So that would be the advantage of being early in the process. And we do that a lot. Like, I don't know, it's a lot. It's the unfortunate part of what we do is we say no to a lot more people than we say yes to. The fortunate part of that is, you don't want somebody that says yes to you to get you to write a check on something they can't ultimately end up. I like to tell a lot of people, if you walk through the mall, if you have kids and you walk through the mall, right? There's the modeling booth in the mall, right? And every kid that walks by with their parents is like, oh my God, your daughter is gorgeous. She could be a model. And then you walk over, and then before you know it, it's, well, you need a headshot package, and you're writing checks, right? Well, of course, none of those kids that buy the headshot package turn out to be models, because that's not a modeling agency in the mall. That's a headshot package company in the mall, right? So, to me, that there's a ton of value in no, right? So, as an inventor, you just have to be comfortable with that and not view it as like personal in any way, right? I'm being much kinder to tell somebody that can't work, and here's why, than I am to tell them it's a great idea, write a check. Because a lot of people do. A lot of people spend a ton of money on things that can't work for obvious reasons. Maybe not to them, obviously, but to somebody looking at it. So I think earlier in the process is better because you can certainly do it at any point in the process, but the reality of it is most of your ideas aren't going to work. So you have to look at inventing. Like, you have to invest a little bit, as little as you can, in a lot of different ideas till you find one that works. If you bet the farm on one idea, the likelihood of success is really low. It just is what it is. So, yeah.
For CPETs, did you have to do any safety testing?
We did.
You did?
Yeah, so we did. Yeah, and when you, there's safety testing, obviously, because it's a kid's product, because of the age range, so we had to do all of those things. And then beyond that, when you do business with Walmart and Bed Bath & Beyond and Target, you're limited in, I shouldn't say you're limited, but your manufacturing is scrutinized as well. So you have all of those companies have social compliance regulations, so they want to know where you're making them, what's that factory's all about, all that other stuff.
But I would think anytime you're touching a safety device,
Totally.
They're going to be on you.
Yeah, totally. And we were, and we got a lot of that resistance in the beginning. And we, like, literally up to the point of selling a couple million units, we were still getting that resistance from a retailer or two. But then it became like, look, we sold 2 million of these. No one's ever said a bad thing. Yeah, yeah.
And your sales are still strong?
Yeah, it's a good, yeah. And going to be stronger again in the fourth quarter of this year.
So, like, how does that, I wanted to ask about this. You get changing demographics, like the 8-year-olds now are different than the 8-year-olds 10 years ago. So are you tweaking any of your,
Well, the designs. So what happened with CPETs is we did the generic designs at the beginning, the cat, the dog, all this other stuff. And then, for instance, the Ninja Turtles came out, which is, it was kind of an old franchise, but they were coming out with a new movie. So we layered over the Ninja Turtles license and sold it in line. And then Minions had the movie last summer. So maybe the summer before last. But anyway,
so
Minions.
you're sub-licensing on
Our licensees. So our licensee would then go out and get the Minions license or get the, then they pay us the same and then they have to pay for that license. But with those licenses, you can sell it at a higher price.
So you pay, there's a royalty you pay, but then the product
they pay us a royalty, right? That's right.
Yeah, so it's worth them paying the royalty
premium,
for
right.
what?
The upsell, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
So if we submit our idea through your website, could we say we heard about you through this group?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
preferential treatment?
We'll take great care of you. I don't want to say it'll be preferential, but we'll take great care of you. Yeah.
Mike, thank you very much for
Bob, it's a real pleasure.
I found like familiar words from a few years ago, but it's a small gesture of our appreciation.
Well, now go to the picnic.
Give you a pass. You can go to the picnic. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Our year's membership. But
Thanks
we'll
so
always
much,
keep
guys.
you on the
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's great.
Great. And obviously you'll be available.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely.